Hi, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and we're here with Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better, where we talk to thought leaders, authors, and business leaders about tactical and tangible ways that you can improve your life and your career. And I'm really excited that today we're here with Kindra Hall. She is the author of the new book, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. Kindra, it's great to have you.
Dorie, I am so happy to be here. Thrilled, really. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. So we're going to be talking today about silencing our inner critic and moving beyond that so we can actually accomplish the great things that we are meant to. So, Kindra, the first question that I have for you, does everyone have an inner critic? I mean, it seems like they probably do, but what's going on here? And why is this such a prevalent phenomenon that so many people, I mean, this seems somehow evolutionarily maladaptive, right? That people have these voices in their heads. What's going on here?
That's exactly what it is. Everybody has an inner critic. It's part of our human programming. It was, as we developed as humans way back, 400,000 years ago, it was that voice inside our head that was collecting and curating experiences and paying very close attention to the ones that didn't go so well. We learned through things that, where it didn't end happily ever after. And so the inner critic is really there from an evolutionary standpoint to keep us safe, to make sure that we don't make mistakes that lead to our untimely death. And fortunately, it's there, right? Because it's good for us to learn from our mistakes. Unfortunately, it hasn't really updated much in the past couple 100,000 years.
All right. So this is just an example of a good thing gone bad.
Yes.
It's a little hyperactive. So we got to figure out how to rein this sucker in.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. I mean, it was there to, if you think about it from a collective perspective, to keep the tribe, to keep the community safe. And then from an individual perspective, if you got kicked out of the tribe, you would be alone and you would die. So we see this inner critic come up even in the simplest things, like when we post to something on social media. And even though we get all of this great response and support, there's maybe that one comment that's even a little lukewarm. And doesn't your brain just start firing off like, oh my gosh, and your inner critic is saying you're about to die. But when in fact you're not. It's just social media.
That's right. You are not about to die. It is just social media, folks. We're here with Kindra Hall. I'm Dorie Clark, and we're here with Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better. Kindra is the author of the new book. It's called Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. And if you're tuning in live here, let us know who you are. Let us know where you are dialing in from. We would love to hear from you. And we want to say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in from around the world, our wonderful regular team of Better viewers. We have Karen here from Boston. We have Ali Murad joining us. We have Patricia also from Boston, Jennifer from Jacksonville Beach, Cheryl from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Wendy's here, Anastasia from Denver, David from North Carolina, Anna from Italy. We have Gabriel from Mexico, Raul from Miami, Sushma from India, Mustafa. We have Cynthia from LA, Tanisha from Switzerland, Roger from Berlin, and many more. We love having all of you.
I love this. Hi.
It is a great group of folks, and please put your questions for Kindra Hall into the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. Now, Kindra, I'm curious, in your book, in your new book that you have written, you actually break it down into a 3-step process. The first one that you talk about in Choose Your Story, Change Your Life is you become your story. Maybe we can start there. What does it mean that you become your story?
Well, we've heard the phrase, right? You are what you eat. Your thoughts become things. It's another way of understanding this. However, and we talked a little bit about the actual neuroscience and our programming as humans, but I felt like it was really important to start the book here, to understand that the stories you're telling yourself are actually shaping and dictating your life. And that realization just right there can change everything. So for example, we often think that a decision is presented to us, we make a decision, we take action, and then those actions compound over time, and that's how our life is developed. However, in this first portion of the book, this is where we unveil the fact that in reality, an opportunity or a decision is presented to us, and before we take action, there is this almost, Dorie, it's almost invisible. It's completely subconscious. Remember, over the hundreds of thousands of years, we've automated this process of self-storytelling. So a decision is presented to us, and before we take action, our brain, our subconscious, plays back stories to us. And these stories either way, regardless, these stories dictate the action we take next. And the stories, if that's the case, can either lead you to an action that's going to serve you to a better future, or it will lead you to action that keeps you safe, secure, in the same spot you are, where you just keep going round in circles. So ultimately, and that's why it was so important to me that the book was called Choose Your Story. If we know that there's this slice of time where we tell ourselves stories that dictate our actions, well, then it really is our own responsibility to intentionally choose which stories we tell ourselves right there, based on the actions that we ultimately want to take that will ultimately get us to where we want to go. So that's really why I wanted to start there. We become our stories for better or worse.
I love that. That's great. We're here with Kindra Hall. I'm Dorie Clark. This is our weekly interview show for Newsweek. Better, we want to say hi to some of the great friends tuning in from around the world. Rami's here from Syria. We've got Bruna from Brazil, Japar from Basel, Kalyani from Bharat. That's OG for India. We have a LinkedIn user for Dallas. We have a LinkedIn user from Saudi Arabia. Rocio is here from Malaga, Spain. A LinkedIn user from Pittsburgh. We've got Sarav from India. Ash is here from Sydney. We've got Diana from South Carolina, Jennifer from Carson, California, Baba Yemi from Lagos. We've got a LinkedIn friend from Cincinnati, and Valerie's here from Limerick, Ireland. We love having every single one of you. If you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like button and the share button so you can benefit from Kindra Hall's insights. If you want to learn more, just go to kindrahall.com. We're talking about how to silence your inner critic. Now, Kindra, if someone is watching here, not to name any names, but if someone here is tuning in and they feel they have an overactive inner critic, what would you suggest as the first step to dampening some of these voices that might be getting a little nettlesome for them?
Actually, Dorie, Karen asked the question right here. Do you believe that we can retrain our subconscious? And that is exactly what it is all about. We can't stop these negative stories. Remember, they are a part of us. However, what we can do is take back control of the stories we're telling ourselves. And so the very first step is to become aware that these stories are happening to us, that these stories are in the back of our mind, because until you make that, who is it? Carl Jung has that quote that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, you're just going to keep going along and calling it fate. Now, that is a paraphrase, but the very first step is to recognize, oh my gosh, in this moment where there's a key decision I have to make, I am telling myself a negative story. So for example, maybe there's an opportunity, maybe you're supposed to go to a networking event. Now, let me know in the chat here if any of you are like physically terrified of networking events. Like, even as I say that, your stomach gets a little queasy. I am the same way. And so some of the stories you might be telling yourself are stories of the time you were picked last for kickball because nobody liked you, the time that you didn't get invited to the birthday party, or no one asked you to the school dance back in high school. We have these really old stories that can come back and say, you don't belong here. No one's going to want to talk to you. Don't go to that networking event. The first step is to recognize, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to go to this networking event. I just had 4 stories come back to me from 30 years ago. I need to do something about this. So awareness, catching those self stories is the first very important step.
I love that. Yes, that's really great and useful. Kindra Hall is here. Kindra is the author of the new book. It's called Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. And this is Dorie Clark. If you want to make sure that you never miss one of our weekly Newsweek interview shows, just go to DorieClark.com. You can sign up there, get on the email list, and you'll get reminders about conversations like this that happen every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, and 6 p.m. in Europe, which is where I am right now. We're talking. Yes, thank you, Kindra. We're talking about how to silence your inner critic, and we have some great questions coming in here. Jennifer is actually curious, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Kindra. How do you break the cycle of what's keeping us in a safe space when in the past that was a good thing? That was what served us, but now it might be holding us back. What do you think about that?
Oh, Jennifer, this is such a great question. And to answer it, I want to actually expand on what we were just talking about a minute ago, which was the first step. And in the second part of the book, right, Dorie, we talked about the first part of the book was just like, hey, we become our stories. The second part of the book really outlines the 4-step process for breaking this cycle. So first we have to become aware. We have to catch them in the act, those negative self stories. The second step is to analyze, where is this story coming from? Why is it here? And does this story even serve me anymore? Which that brings us into the question that we were just asked, which is, okay, the third step is to choose. And the key here in that question was, if being in that safe space has served us before, it's good to recognize that. However, if you have a desire to go another step, then those safe space stories are no longer serving you. So then your job is to choose stories, to go back and look throughout your life of times when maybe you did take a risk, you stepped outside of your comfort zone, and that paid off in a big or a small way. So maybe you applied for a job that you didn't quite think you were qualified for, or you considered not applying for. You stepped out of your comfort zone and you got the job. It could be something more personal with your family or your health and well-being. But the key right there is and I feel like it's important that we say this, if you're in a safe space and you like the space you're in, then be okay with that too, right? Like it is about owning your story. If you're like, you know what, my life is good and everybody's talking about next level, but I like my level, I want to stay at my level, then by all means, stay at your level. Like, I'm so excited for you. I don't think enough people say that, right? Like, stay at the level. However, as I heard kind of embedded in that question that was asked, you want to go to the next level, then it's time to choose different stories. And you might have to put in some effort to find those non-safe space stories. It might take a little bit of work, but once you find a few of them that mean something to you, and that's when you go into the final step of the process, which is retelling yourself those stories over and over and over again.
That is great. We're here with Kindra Hall. She's the author of the new book, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. You can learn more about her at kindrahall.com. And this is Dorie Clark. We're here talking about how to silence your inner critic. We want to say hi to great friends tuning in from around the world. If you're just joining us, let us know who you are and type into the chat box where you're dialing in from. We want to say hi to great friends, including Holly from the North Shore. We've got Wendy joining us. We have Holly from California. We have Adnan from Turkey. We've got a LinkedIn friend from Vancouver, Christine from Rochester, Max is here from France. We have Dominika from Poland, Bianca from Brazil, Rita Marie is here from Ireland, Deepak from India, Hagop from Kuwait, Celeste from South Africa, and Renee from Costa Rica. We love having every single one of you here in our conversation with Kindra Hall. Kindra, one of the points that you talk about in your new book, which I love, you call it hacking your essential stories. stories. We all love a good life hack these days. Can you tell us what you mean by hacking your essential stories?
Yeah, this is so, and that becomes that's the third part of the book. So we all have different areas of our life, and they're always in flux, right? Sometimes we feel like we're really nailing our relationships, everything is good with our family, but something's really struggling with our career. Sometimes our career's in tip-top shape, but we're really struggling with our health and well-being. So ultimately here, it's taking a look at what area of your life that those stories might be holding you back, and you'd be better served by telling yourself some better ones. And then in doing that, inserting those stories into those small moments to help those actions that you need to take easier. So for example, Dorie, can I tell you one of the stories that I was working on? Yeah, I'll tell you that.
Please.
So it was December 2020. So even saying 2020, it's like a 4-letter word, even though it's numbers. I understand. I was really struggling with my own health and well-being. I'm an avid, I love going to Soul Cycle classes. Like group fitness is my thing, but of course group fitness, there wasn't a whole lot of it going on in December 2020. And so I was forced to work out. I had a spin bike at my house, but I just couldn't seem to get myself to that bike. I was suffering as a result because my physical well-being was suffering. I use it for a lot of stress release, mental well-being, but I could not bring myself to get on that bike and exercise all on my own. And this has been going on for a while. And so finally, one day in December 2020, I was in the middle of writing this book, doing the research for this book. I decided to try to hack my way there. And so when I woke up and I found myself resisting taking the action that I knew I needed to take, that I knew as soon as I did it, I would feel so much better, I decided to insert a couple of stories, positive stories that I chose that would hopefully move me to take that action. And so I looked through my life, my experience, to experiences, stories of times where I had been consistent with my exercise and I felt really good about myself. And one of those stories, well, there were a couple of them. One of them was at a wedding that my husband and I had gone to several years ago, and I'd been taking really great care of myself, and I felt so strong and healthy. I remember exactly the dress I was wearing. I remember the shoes. I remember dancing the night away at that wedding, feeling like the most beautiful woman in the room, except for the bride, because she gets her moment. But and even as I retold myself that story, you can probably see it as I'm retelling it to you here. I was overcome by this feeling. And there's another story and then one more story, because no story is off limit. If it's a story that makes you feel how you need to feel in order to take that action, that story counts. So there was one story from back when I was in graduate school, and I remember I'd been swimming laps a lot all on my own. There's no lonelier exercise than swimming laps. And there was a kid at the pool named Pool Boy. He had a real name, but I only called him Pool Boy. And he asked me out on a date, and I remember getting all dressed for the date, and I opened the door, and I remember him standing there. I remember what I was wearing, and I remember him looking at me and said, "Wow." Now, that was 30 years ago, 20 years ago, however long ago, but I still remember how I felt in that moment. So I told myself that handful of stories, and what do you know? I told the kids to get back on their iPads, and unless they were bleeding or choking, and then I told them, I'm like, you know what? Don't actually eat anything. Just unless you're bleeding, I'm going to be out on a bicycle. And it was those stories I was able to hack myself into the action and get back on a sustained track of health and well-being that was really important for me at that time.
I love that. That's great. We're here with Kindra Hall. This is Dorie Clark with Newsweek's weekly interview show, Better. If you want to learn more about Kindra, just check out her new book, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. Kindra, while I am riffing, maybe you could check in your preferences section, because I suspect there is a rustling, and I suspect it may be coming from your AirPods, and I suspect it may be that the audio input is coming from the AirPods. If you can double check, that would be amazing. And we also want to say hi to our great great friends from around the world. We have Servan, who's joining us from Istanbul, Lauren, power attorney, joining us from Miami. We have a LinkedIn friend from Kuwait. We have Corinne from Sao Paulo, Diana from Portugal, a LinkedIn friend from Memphis, and many more. We love having all of you here and joining us. And Kindra, your first book or your previous one was called Stories That Stick. And I think that most of the folks who are joining us actually probably want to also become not just better storytellers for themselves, although that's important, and good job, because I hear that nice microphone now.
I know, I did it.
You did it, and that's amazing. But we also want to become better storytellers to the world. So if you are giving people, if they have not yet had the chance to read Stories That Stick, maybe you could tell us a little bit more. What are a couple of things that most people can keep in mind so that they can become better storytellers when they are making that big pitch or speaking at work or things like that?
Yeah, I think that this is so important. And it's what brought me a lot of joy. Choose Your Story, Change Your Life is all about the stories that we tell ourselves, and Stories That Stick is all about the power of the stories that we tell others and how we can engage people and be more compelling and more influential and more memorable. And I'm sure what you've noticed, even throughout the conversation that we just had, some of the stories, examples that I gave you, they're very small stories. I mean, a story of a wedding I went to, a story of, pool boy, that guy. I mean, maybe he's listening right now. He has no idea that I talk about him on a regular basis. But these are small stories. And one of the biggest misconceptions, whether we're thinking about our inner stories or the stories we tell outwardly, is that in order for a story to be effective, it has to be some big, over the top experience, when in reality, sometimes the smallest moments can offer the greatest insight and mean the most to an audience. So that would be the very first thing that I would offer to anyone who says, I've heard that storytelling is really important as I'm in sales or I'm in marketing, but I don't have any stories to tell. What you're really saying is, I haven't recognized the power of my everyday stories. And so I don't tell them. And again, this is part of our processing. Your stories don't sound like stories to you. They just sound like your life. So it does require, as you're telling stories outwardly, to take a step back and say, wait, that could be a story. That could be a story. And then to seize those small moments and tell them.
That's terrific. We're here with Kindra Hall. If you want to learn more about her work, just go to kindrahall.com. We're talking about her new book, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. And we want to say hi to some of our amazing friends. Defina's joining us from Bulgaria. Dennis is here from Leadville, Colorado. We have a LinkedIn friend from Jacksonville and many more. But I want to specifically turn, Kindra, to a comment that came in from Doug. And Doug is curious. He wants to know, what are some of the things that you'd recommend to shift our perspective to be less focused on the emotional weight that we feel from negative self-talk? It's true. Oftentimes the narratives that we have, they feel so heavy. They feel so burdensome. Is there a way that we can shake some of that off?
Yeah. And it's funny, Dorie, that was the same. I saw that question come in and I was like, oh, I want to answer that for Doug and for everyone who's listening. I think the most important thing here, and we talked about it at the very beginning, is that this negative, I think there's two different things. We have this negative self-talk, and then we have how we feel about the fact that we're talking negatively to ourselves. And where it often gets really tangled up is we beat ourselves up about the fact that we're talking negatively about ourselves. And so I think the very first step is to let that go, to understand that this is a part of our programming, to pay more attention to the negative experiences, to use them as a like, oh, I shouldn't do that, I don't want to risk this, as a method of survival. And so even just if you do nothing else but to forgive yourself for the negative self-talk that you have, that alone will feel like a huge weight off your shoulders. And then the second step to that is, and it flows smoothly into the second step, comes with that analyze step in the process, which is, okay, so so where did this come from? Like, why is this here? I was talking to a gentleman who kept beating himself up about being such a perfectionist. And he knew that his perfectionism was keeping him from taking action, keeping him from moving forward, but he was being really hard on himself about being a perfectionist. So he went through the process, and he found, through analyzing, he found several stories of when he was growing up. His father, he was really bad at going to bed. And so his father created a chart, and it was a perfect go to bed chart. And every night that he went to bed perfectly, he would get a gold star. And if he got 7 gold stars in a row, he got to go to the local toy store and pick out a toy. Well, what is that story teaching this child? To be perfect. And he doesn't need to be mad at his dad about it, because his dad was just doing the best he could. But now he can better understand, oh, I have been programmed throughout my life to be perfect. I don't need to beat myself up about it. I need to be aware of it. But now I can choose better stories so that I can move forward from here.
That's so great. Thank you very much. We're here with Kindra Hall. She's the author of the new book, Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. I'm Dorie Clark. We're talking about how to silence your inner critic. And we have, and also, if you're enjoying this conversation, make sure your friends can benefit from it. Hit the like button, hit the share button so that they can enjoy this conversation as well. And Kindra, a great question came in from India. Our friend Sushma wants to know, what are some of the action points to build awareness that allow us to catch and change stories? Sometimes we might be getting kind of far down the garden path of these negative self-talk. Is there a way that we can somehow catch ourselves and realize, oh, wait, I need to change the story? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I love this, because I think the more that we can be systematic and Dorie, this is something that was important to me, even in stories that stick. People say, oh, tell more stories. And the next question is, but how? So being systematic in how you approach this self-storytelling shift that we're making here is really important. So there are several different ways that you can catch stories that aren't serving you in the act. One thing that I would suggest is, we all have, maybe you have a watch or a various device that pings you and tells you to stand up or breathe or turn around or jump up and down 3 times. And this sounds so basic, but again, it's these simple steps that can make a really big difference. Use that as also a check-in to say, what story am I telling myself right now? Because until you ask yourself that question, you will be completely unaware of it. Another thing to pay attention to is how you feel in your body. A lot of times our bodies give us response to, oh, there's a negative story happening here. I was recently hanging out with my mother, and she said something to me, and I could feel, and it was innocuous, but I could feel my butt, like there was a tightening in my chest. There was this like anxiety that kind of crawled up my back. And I know well enough that, oh, wait a minute, that is pulling up some old stories about myself that I need to pay attention to. And the other, one other strategy that I would give you is to take a look at those downtimes in your day. I know that I talk to myself a lot when I'm in the shower. I talk to myself a lot. If some people talk to themselves a lot when they're driving a car. So if you have those, maybe you talk to yourself a lot when you're cooking dinner. If you have those moments in your day where your mind is kind of free to wander, that's another opportunity for you to check in and say, what story am I telling myself right now?
Love that. This is great. We are here with Kindra Hall. We're getting ready to wind down shortly, but Kindra, my last question for you. I am here in Dusseldorf with a friend who is also a professional speaker. You do a lot of speaking about your books and storytelling. And I asked her, what would you want to ask Kindra Hall? And her question for you is this. You have built a great speaking career. She wanted to know, and I think lots of people here would probably be interested as well. Was there a moment that you can think of where you felt like things were sort of clicking in terms of being able to sort of be come into your own and really have reached a new level, to have sort of, the moment at which you leveled up in your speaking, whether, and you can answer this in two ways. One could be in terms of your skill at your craft, like a moment when something clicked. And also perhaps if there was a moment of recognition where it suddenly was like, oh, I got to take this stage, or, this milestone happened that showed me that there's a new level now. So if you can talk about either or both of those transitional moments, that would be great.
I have a lot. I think we all have many, if we were to look back. So that what an amazing question. And if any of us were to look back on our trajectory, we could see that there was a whole variety of moments, of stories, and they're all coming back to me, right? I remember there was one, it was the very first event that I had ever been paid to speak. I wasn't really, to speak at. And I remember walking away from that, and I had done I wish it had been on video because it was nothing to what I do right now. But I remember walking away from that event and standing in my hotel room. It was at some cheap hotel way off the strip in Las Vegas, and looking out the window and being like, wait, I could do this. And the feeling that I had of this could be a thing. The other interesting thing when you talk about certain events of having made it, or I've had some of those experiences that you would think, oh, this is it. Now I know, now I've really made it. But what's really funny is on the other side of each of those, it wasn't what I thought. It's not that the event was amazing, but it was actually these smaller moments that were wait, I am who I am. This is what I'm meant to do. And the bigger stages, or the different audiences, were more just icing on the cake. So I think the key to anyone, as you're finding your way and being yes, okay, I can really do this. You're struggling with imposter syndrome or whatever it is. I would say the most important thing that has ever happened to me is me choosing the stories I tell myself about who I am and what I'm capable of on a stage, and what I'm there to do, and when that's made a difference in someone else's life. And that's true for no matter what your career is to use the stories that remind you of who you are and what you came here to do.
Fantastic. This is Dorie Clark. We've been here with Kindra Hall. Her new book is Choose Your Story, Change Your Life. You can learn more about her at Kindra Hall, and we're here every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Thank you all for tuning in. And Kindra Hall, thank you for being here.
Dorie, I'm sweating. I got so into it. My face is all, I have to go take a cold shower or something. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, and take care, everyone.